Welcome, my friends, to today's episode, which is also the final episode in 2025 for my Feelings Over Tea podcast. I am your host, Dr. NaKaisha Tolbert Banks, and I am thrilled that you are taking some time out of your day to listen to this episode. I'm glad that you're here joining me for an episode where I want to close out this year and prepare you for the next. I want to talk about something many of us carry quietly, and I want to talk about and share and reflect on what it means to grow after being mishandled and how we refuse to bring our self neglect into a new season. Yes, big topic, bold topic, but one that I think we would be remiss if we just didn't spend some time reflecting on and considering what does it look like for us going into a new season. So this episode is going to be a moment to breathe, a moment to reflect, and to reclaim the parts of ourselves that we have maybe abandoned just to survive. So take a minute to just think about, has this shown up for me in any way in 2025? Self-neglect, abandonment of just yourself, people, places, things, just to survive. So as you're thinking about that, guess what? I'm going to dive right in. So we're getting ready to get this episode started right here and right now. Welcome to my Feelings Over Tea podcast, where experts and everyday people will sip tea and spill the tea about all things life and mental health related. So grab yourself a cup of tea and join me, your host, Dr. NaKaisha Tolbert Banks, for hot topics, helping you to cut through the muck of life and live your life well in my Feelings Over Tea podcast, right here and right now. So, welcome to the show, everyone. This is our final episode in 2025. Welcome. If you're listening to this, congratulations, because you have arrived at this point. So, I am excited as your host to bring to you a topic that I think many of us can benefit from reflecting on. Taking your own notes. So you might want to have like a pen and paper, pencil and paper, open your notes section on your phone to just start jotting down some things that may come to mind as we journey through this episode together. And again, I'm talking about self neglect or bringing self neglect into a new season and thinking about growth and refusing to be mishandled going into your new season. And growth is something that I say sometimes can be painful. It is also a beautiful experience. It can be very reflective. It can be exhilarating, if we could use that word. Growth is that thing that I think for everyone has to be self-defined as to what it means to you, what growth has looked like, and how it has changed you. And when I say change, I'm leaving that open, right? Because change can be beneficial and sometimes change can be something else. But growth often begins with honesty. Being mishandled can look like being dismissed, being overlooked, being underestimated. or maybe even being taken advantage of. And I mean, if we take it a step further, when we think about being mishandled, it can even look like us mishandling ourselves. hmm So you may think, well, what does mishandling myself look like? Well, that could look like shrinking, right? So I'm shrinking in spaces where I should be growing. Maybe I'm staying silent in places where I should really be using my voice. Or maybe it's simply accepting less than what you deserve. But this, isn't necessarily about blame. So don't take the finger and point it at self and start to feel bad about being mishandled. But take this moment as you're listening to this episode to really think about and gain clarity. So when we name, and I think this is a really critical point. So again, if you're jotting down notes, writing things down, I want you to think about this, that when we name what has happened to us, we stop carrying it in the dark, we bring it to light, and we can begin to understand the patterns, the people, or the environments, and the environments that have shaped us, and we can start choosing differently. I'll say that again. When we're able to name what has happened to us, we stop carrying this burden. We have an opportunity to stop carrying the burden because we have more clarity and we can begin to understand the patterns, the people, and the environments that have shaped us. And we start to choose differently. So I want you to let that soak in for a minute because it's really profound about growth. When we're talking about growth, there's an element of change that has to happen. And that change, it's really critical because it can only happen when we have clarity. So there's always a moment, and I would say sometimes it's really loud and sometimes it may be very quiet when we realize that we can't keep living the same way, right? You get to a point where you're like, the answer's no. This cannot go on any longer. And so that loud or sometimes quiet moment that happens might be exhaustion, right? Where you're just completely exhausted and you're like, enough is enough. Maybe it's a boundary that has been crossed one too many times, and your answer finally becomes no. And then maybe it's the sudden awareness that you have been pouring into everyone else while running on empty, right? You know how they say you can't pour from an empty vessel? So maybe you've just had this awareness that I'm pouring, pouring, pouring. And then when I actually look at this container that I'm pouring from, it's actually empty. Like there is nothing left for me to give. And so as we think about and we talk about growth, it begins when we say, I deserve better from others, but more importantly, I deserve better from myself. And this turning point isn't necessarily always dramatic, but at this point that we're talking about change and growth, this turning point is intentional. It's the moment that we stop negotiating our worth. Again, and I'm going to say that, and I don't know why I keep repeating myself, but maybe these are really, really good points that I want you to get. So when we talk about growth, growth begins when we say, I deserve better from others, but I also deserve better from myself. And again, that turning point, it's intentional, and it's the moment that we stop negotiating our worth. So I want you to take a minute and think about, what does that look like for me? Right? If you've gone through this, so maybe you're listening to this episode and you're like, oh, glory, 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 right? I have gone through that, been there, done that. I've gone through that growth process and I refuse to be mishandled anymore. And so you may be listening to this and this is just a refresher for you or a reminder for you, right? What did that moment, that pivotal moment look like for you when you decided that growth had to happen, right? Change has to come about, and you were intentional about no longer negotiating your worth. And I think as we talk about refusing to be mishandled, this is an act of self respect. It's choosing your boundaries without apology, right? So when I talked about shrinking earlier, it's important to understand the areas or the times where you shrink, right? Where you are silent, right? And in your gut, I call it the epicenter, right? In your gut, it's saying, say something, do something, you know, grow tall, like sit up straight and say that thing or do that thing. But you go against yourself for a number of reasons, right? Maybe you haven't gotten to that point to where you recognize that this no longer serves me. I can no longer do this. I deserve better from myself, right? So refusing to be mishandled is an act of self-respect. It's choosing boundaries without an apology. It's walking away from what drains you. It's speaking up even when your voice shakes. Because we've been there, all been there, I guess I should say, because I've been there before, right? It may be that thing that you are afraid to do, but all of a sudden what happens is, again, is you reach that point where enough is enough. And it's like, this thing needs to be said. I'm no longer choosing to be silent. And so I'm going to say this thing, even if my voice begins to shake and quiver, right? Being refusing to be mishandled, it's also internal, right? So not only within like your gut that is saying, I need to do something different, but it's also a mind thing, right? That you have to begin to think in your mind, what has held me back from speaking up? What has held me back from doing that hard thing? And so when I say it's internal, it's refusing to mishandle yourself through overworking, over-explaining, or overgiving. It's learning to rest without guilt. It's choosing relationships that honor your humanity, right? And this refusal is not anger, but it's alignment. It's you stepping into a season where your peace and your ability to say, I deserve better from myself is non negotiable, right? So that doesn't mean to hell in the handbasket with everybody in the whole world, but that may mean that there's some overhauling that has to happen, right? In order to get into alignment. So again, this refusal is not anger, but it is alignment. So as we step into a new year, right? Because it's coming, 2026 is around the corner. We get to decide what comes with us and what stays behind. So as we think about carrying growth into this new season, we bring the lessons, we bring the clarity, we bring the courage, but we leave the self-neglect behind. We leave the shrinking behind, and we leave the belief that we must tolerate mistreatment to be loved, to be valued, or to be accepted. All of that has got to go. Growth is not about becoming someone new. It's a newer version of yourself, but it's about returning to yourself. Because again, as I talked about, there are some things that you may have neglected. And it isn't until you're tired or you're frustrated enough, right? That you begin to look at yourself, your situations, your circumstances differently. And again, like I said earlier, now comes the component of trust and awareness. What have I learned? What am I tired of doing? What am I no longer going to compromise in order for me to get to that next level of whatever that is, right? That I am going to maybe take better care of myself, or I'm no longer going to be in a relationship that doesn't serve me, right? A romantic relationship that has been stagnant for some time, and for whatever reason, maybe I've stayed in that space or that relationship because it was convenient, right? He's happy, I'm unhappy. He's unhappy and I'm unhappy too, right? And we've stayed in it out of convenience. Or maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a workship. I talk about, all of the ships because there's a lot of ships, right? That we get on, friendships, romantic relationships, all of these different ships. And there are times where you just have to say, where do I stand in all of this? What does this look like for me? What am I noticing about myself as I look to growth in this new season? And so as you think about that, there are some things that you may notice no longer feel like they're in alignment or that they're unaligned, right? Sometimes it's just minor tweaking of things that you have to do to say, okay, this feels better aligned for me. But again, growth is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to yourself. And so you really have to take a moment to think about and to say, who am I? Who is NaKaisha at her core? Who is NaKaisha? Do I feel aligned? What feels unaligned? Where do I need to make some changes? Where do I need to stand up more? Where do I need to loosen some things up? Where do I need to get rid of some things, right? How do I become reconnected with self? Where have I neglected self, right? So, and you may have to, go back and start this episode from the beginning just to, again, connect yourself with some of the things that I've talked about and I've shared. Just start to jot down some notes about you and where you're at and where you're going in this new season. Are all checks and balances in place, or are there some things that are unaligned? And guess what? Again, like I said earlier, growth is not something that happens overnight. Growth isn't something that's always rainbows, sunshine, and unicorns, right? Growth can be hard. Growth can make you cry. I've been there. Growth can make you cry. Growth will have you thinking. Growth will have you contemplating. But ultimately, when you do the work, and you truly consider self and what is unaligned and needs to be realigned and connected, you start to get answers for yourself. As I said before, you start to get clarity, right? And as you start to do these things, you can become a little bit more courageous because it's moving me into a season of better, right? I always say if you do nothing, nothing changes. It may get worse, but it ain't gonna get better because you're not doing anything to shift that culture around you. So you have to shift. So I feel like that was a whole lot in a little bit of time. But as my holiday gift to you, I prepared a brief guided meditation for you that you can just listen to and take some time to really just breathe. Gift yourself with love, a gentle release of those things that you're choosing not to carry into your new season. And also take this guided meditation as a moment to reflectively breathe in joy and peace. So, slowly take a deep breath in and let it fall out softly. And just get comfortable in whatever space you're listening to this. And again, I always throw out a disclaimer. If you are driving, just pause it until you reach your destination. No driving and meditating, not a good idea. So as you get comfortable, just take a slow, steady, deep breath in through your nose. Fill up those lungs really good with air and hold it for a second and release through your mouth. Again, take a deep breath through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Slow and gentle. And just allow your shoulders to drop and your jaw to loosen and your mind to settle into this moment. And as you breathe, I want you to imagine a small light at the center of your chest. And that is the part of you that knows your worth. That's the part of you that knows your boundaries and your capacity to grow. And with each inhale, that light expands. And with each exhale, it strengthens. So as you continue to take these slow and gentle breaths in through your nose, imagining that small light at the center of your chest, and exhale slowly. And as you listen to the sound of my voice, I want you to silently repeat these words after me to yourself. I am growing. I am learning. I am no longer available for being mishandled. Again, I am growing. I am learning. I am no longer available for being mishandled. Feel the truth of those words as they settle into your body, not with tension, but with clarity. Growth doesn't always require hardness, but from you, it requires honesty. And it also requires you choosing yourself. So take one more breath and let this final affirmation land for you softly within you. I rise with intention. I protect my peace. I honor my becoming. Again, I rise with intention. I protect my peace. I honor my becoming. Friends, I want to thank you for joining me and sharing in this space with me today. As this year ends, give yourself permission to grow without guilt and to protect your peace without explanation. Remember, you are worthy of care, respect, and gentleness from others and from yourself. I want to thank you for spending this time with me today on this episode. I've enjoyed this season two, which has been all of 2025, sharing with you, laughing with you, talking with you, inspiring you. Hopefully, you have been encouraged by this episode today. Again, if you need to go back and listen to it again, as you're using this in preparation for your new season, take the time to do what it is you need to do to get yourself into alignment. I am your host, Dr. NaKaisha Tolbert Banks. Please like this episode, share, subscribe to this podcast. You can join me on Instagram at My Feelings Over Tea, also on YouTube at First Lady Giggles. That's the number one ST Lady Giggles. I am so thankful for you. Here's to a new season filled with intention, healing, and the courage to refuse anything that mishandles your spirit. Again, I'm your host, Dr. NaKaisha Tolbert Banks. I look forward to a future episode. Take care, y'all. I'm out.